At launch, this Q5 set a new benchmark for sporty handling in compact SUVs. If you had to criticise, you might have said that the steering was a little light and the ride a bit firm, but that was about it. Otherwise, here was a car of this kind you could buy without the usual clunky dynamic downsides. Audi's clear class leadership in this, though, has been slightly eroded since this model's original launch. BMW's second generation X3 and more notably the Range Rover Evoque, both showing just how good a car of this kind could really be on tarmac while maintaining a modicum of off-road ability. Audi, though, has responded in kind. Suspension tweaks have softened the ride, and a new electromechanical power steering system offers more feel around the bends. Better still, there's a completely new engine range beneath the bonnet, all units employing direct injection turbocharging, plus stop-start for frugal emissions. That means that they can all accomplish the clever trick of offering more power with lower running costs, and no engine demonstrates that better than the one I'm driving here, the petrol 2-litre TFSI. Now, don't confuse this power plant with the one of the same name that was offered in the original version of this car. It's very different. For a start, it's got more power, 225 PS, good enough to get you from rest to 62 miles an hour in just 7.1 seconds, on the way to a top speed of 138 miles an hour. But what's more important is that the grunt that undergirds all of that acceleration, the 350 Newton meters of it, is developed from much further down in the rev range, from just 1500 RPM. So much so that you've really got to have a need for speed to want to plump for the pokier petrol variant in this lineup. Also new, a 272 PS 3-litre TFSI supercharged unit that's good enough for rest to 60 in just 5.9 seconds on the way to a top speed of 145 miles an hour. This 3-litre, though, must be ordered with the 8-speed Tiptronic automatic transmission that's optional on this 2-litre TFSI variant. The majority of Q5 buyers, though, will give these petrol choices no more than a cursory glance on their way to sign up for one of the diesels. In most cases, that'll mean a preference for the 2-litre TDI, now uprated and pokier with 177 PS on tap, good enough to get you from rest to 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds dead, on the way to a top speed of 127 miles an hour. There's the option on this model of a high-tech 7-speed dual-clutch S-tronic auto transmission. And that's the only option if you go for the 3-litre TDI, the 245 PS unit that is considerably quicker. It gets you from rest to 62 miles an hour in just 6.5 seconds on the way to a top speed of 140 miles an hour. Now, this is the variant that's the final stepping stone to the Q5 flagship model, the SQ5, that uses a bi-TDI, bi-turbo diesel engine that really is very quick indeed. It gets to 62 miles an hour from rest in just 5.9 seconds and has to be artificially restrained at 155 miles an hour. It's got 313 PS on tap. Whichever Q5 you choose, it'll come with quattro four-wheel drive. That's something worth pointing out, all-wheel drive no longer being a given on compact SUVs of this kind. As you'd expect from such a performance-minded model, it's very much a tarmac-orientated setup, with the centre differential pushing 60% of the grunt rearwards, but able to redistribute front or rear as necessary, as, for example, you might need when sharp cornering, where torque vectoring brakes aid tighter turn-in. The other situation that'll see the Quattro system earn its keep, of course, is when you venture onto an unpaved surface, statistically a rare occurrence for SUV owners. Audi reckons that only around 2% of them have ever driven on what it calls rough country. Should they try and do so in one of these, they might find themselves actually a little surprised by what it can do, provided, of course, they stick to the gravel tracks, sand and light off-piste use for which it was designed. There are no knobs or levers, of course, nothing as crude as that. The car itself will sense when you're off tarmac, automatically adapting its electronic stability control system into an off-road mode, which can tweak itself according to the surface that you're on, and even incorporate a hill descent control system to ease you gently down really steep slopes. The ESP can even adjust itself to accommodate a roof rack. Find yourself somewhere that you probably shouldn't have ventured with your shiny new Q5, and a surprisingly impressive set of off-road stats suggests that you might make it back to civilization. A torquey set of engines that facilitate a class-leading 2,400 kilogram braked towing capacity can get you through some pretty rough stuff. Somewhere that you'll appreciate useful approach and departure angles of 25 degrees, a ramp angle of 18 degrees, a total wading depth of 500 millimeters, and a reasonable 200 millimeters of ground clearance. But why am I telling you this when, if you were to buy this car, you'd be so unlikely to ever put those figures to the test? Of more interest will be the way the car responds when your favourite country lane opens up, you're running late, and there's no one in the car but you. That's the kind of scenario that would reward specification of what really is a must-have extra cost feature on this model, the Audi Drive Select system. This setup enables you to alter the throttle response, the amount of power steering assistance, it tweaks the air conditioning, and even enables you to alter the gear shift points of the auto gearbox if you specified that, via a whole range of different settings. Now you'll play with the comfort and dynamic modes probably for the first few days that you own this car. You may even tweak the individual elements of Drive Select via the individual setting that's offered to people who specify the Audi navigation system. But once you've started to live with the car a bit, you'll probably do what I've done over the last few days and just leave the Drive Select in auto to do its own thing, or perhaps leave it in the eco-minded efficiency setting. Now this system really comes into its own if you have the budget to add some of Audi's choicest electronic driving aids to your Q5, for it also works in concert with things like the adaptive damping system that enables you to alter the suspension stiffness, the dynamic steering, and the adaptive cruise control.